Elvis. The name alone conjures images. A hip-shaking rebel, a sequined showman, the king. You think you know him. Everyone does. He sold over 1 billion records, more than any other artist. He had 18 number one singles. His face is on countless posters, t-shirts, coffee mugs. But what if much of what we think we know is just the surface? What if the stories we tell ourselves about Elvis Presley are built on easy assumptions, not on hard facts? For decades, biographers, historians, and music scholars have dug deep. They have sifted through mountains of interviews, documents, recordings, and personal accounts. And what they found often challenges the quick, neat narratives. There are studies that push back on the simple labels. They show a more complex man. A man often misunderstood. They paint a picture that is richer, stranger, and more human than the myth. This isn't about tearing down a legend. It's about understanding him better. It's about looking at 19 common beliefs and seeing how recent biographical work has complicated them. It's about asking, did he really hate his movies? Was he just a puppet of Colonel Parker? Was his music just stolen from black artists? Was he truly a simple country boy? These are big questions, and the answers often surprise us. We will look at what the research actually says. We will explore the people who wrote these studies, the books they published, the dates and numbers that reshape our view. It's time to move past the simple story. It's time to see Elvis as he truly was, and as he still remains full of mysteries. Number 19 was Elvis, just a raw talent untouched by real music study. Many people think Elvis just walked on stage a natural, a raw, untutored genius with a killer voice and hips. The story goes, he just sang what he felt. He had no real musical training, no deep understanding of music theory. He was just a gifted kid from Tupelo in Memphis, but this idea misses so much of his story. It simplifies his deep connection to music. It ignores his lifelong study of sound. Biographers like Peter Guralnick, in his definitive 2-volume work Last Train to Memphis and Careless Love, show a different truth. Elvis was a deeply immersed musician from childhood. He grew up in a household where music was constant. First, it was the Assembly of God Church. There, he absorbed gospel music. He learned about harmony and rhythm from the earliest age. He sang in church services. He listened intently to the gospel quartets that would visit. This wasn't passive listening. It was active learning. He picked up on vocal arrangements. He understood how voices blended. Then, as a teenager in Memphis, he was constantly exposed to different sounds. He would walk to Handy Park on Beale Street. There, he heard the blues. He absorbed the guitar licks and vocal stylings of black musicians. He listened to country music on the radio. He bought records, not just rockabilly, but rhythm and blues, pop, opera. He had an incredibly diverse record collection. He studied these records. He didn't just play them. He listened to how artists phrased their words. He paid attention to the instrumentation. He copied, yes, but he also synthesized. He blended these styles in his own mind. Scotty Moore, his first guitarist, often talked about Elvis's musical intuition. He didn't read music, but he knew exactly what sound he wanted. He would hum parts. He would guide the musicians. He spent hours practicing guitar in his room. He learned chords. He experimented with different strumming patterns. He wasn't just waiting for inspiration to strike. He was working at it. He was a dedicated student of music, even if his classroom was his record player and local radio. His musical knowledge was vast, learned through immersion and passion, not formal lessons. He understood rhythm. He understood melody. He understood emotional delivery. This wasn't just luck. It was hard work. It was a profound musical education. But did he ever consider formal musical education? What specific musical theories did he develop privately that we might never know? How much of his early raw sound was a deliberate performance choice rather than a lack of skill? Number 18 was Elvis completely controlled by Colonel Parker. The image of Colonel Tom Parker as a Svengali figure pulling Elvis's strings is very strong. It's a compelling narrative. The naive country boy in the clutches of a manipulative, shrewd manager. Stories paint Parker as the man who decided everything. The films, the songs, the concert schedule, even Elvis's personal life. It's often said Elvis was a puppet. He had no real say in his own career. This belief has been strengthened by popular culture. But biographical studies reveal a more nuanced relationship. Yes, Colonel Parker was an incredibly powerful figure. His management contract, signed in 1956, gave him an unprecedented 50% of Elvis's earnings. He did make many decisions without Elvis's direct input. He famously kept Elvis from touring internationally. This cost Elvis artistic growth and massive global earnings. Parker also steered him into making a long string of mostly forgettable films. These films like Clam Bake or Kissing Cousins were financially successful, but they creatively stifled Elvis. However, historian Alana Nash, in her book The Colonel: The Extraordinary Story of Colonel Tom Parker and Elvis Presley, details moments where Elvis asserted himself. He wasn't always passive. He pushed back on certain song choices. He fought for creative control in the recording studio. For example, during his 1968 comeback special, Elvis was instrumental in shaping the show's direction. He insisted on playing live in formal sessions with his original band members rather than the Christmas carols Parker initially envisioned. This was a critical artistic triumph. It showed Elvis's power, it showed his vision. Also, the relationship was not one-sided. Elvis genuinely trusted Parker for a long time. Parker handled all the business. This allowed Elvis to focus on the music, something he preferred. Elvis appreciated Parker's early support. Parker saw something in Elvis when others didn't. He leveraged Elvis's unique appeal, and Elvis relied on Parker to shield him from the pressures of fame. He knew Parker could get things done. While Parker's influence was undeniable and often detrimental in the long run, Elvis wasn't a mere automaton. He had moments of defiance. He had his own opinions. He had his own artistic desires. The dynamic was complex. It was a partnership, albeit one heavily skewed in Parker's favor by contract and personality. But did Elvis ever truly understand the full financial implications of Parker's 50% cut? How much of Parker's control was due to Elvis's own avoidance of business matters? And what might have happened if Elvis had fired Parker much earlier, as some urged him to do? Number 17. Did Elvis steal black music? This is a powerful accusation. It's often said Elvis simply took black music, sanitized it, and profited where black artists couldn't. He was a white man who sang like black men. He sold millions of records. Many black artists struggled for recognition and fair pay. This myth implies cultural theft. It suggests Elvis was a perpetrator of systemic injustice. It's a heavy charge, and it needs careful examination. Historians like Michael Bertrand in Race, Rock, and Elvis, and scholars like those at the Center for Popular Music Studies have offered a more nuanced view. Elvis grew up immersed in the sounds of black culture. He lived in Memphis. He lived near black neighborhoods. He admired black artists deeply. He spoke openly about his influences. He credited gospel singers. He credited blues musicians. Artists like Big Mama Thornton, Arthur Crudup, and Sister Rosetta Tharpe were his heroes. He often said, "I wouldn't be nobody without these people." He didn't steal the music in the sense of plagiarizing specific songs without credit. He covered songs. This was a common practice in the music industry then. Many artists covered songs by others. But Elvis's covers often brought the original artists more attention. Arthur Crudup, who wrote That's All Right, gained significant royalties from Elvis's version. While the system was flawed and black artists often didn't receive their due, Elvis himself was not actively trying to suppress them. In fact, his success helped bridge racial divides in music. He introduced black musical forms to a wider white audience that might not have otherwise listened. And it wasn't just imitation. Elvis synthesized, he blended, he brought his own energy, his own vocal style, and his own stage presence. He wasn't just copying, he was creating something new. Sam Phillips, the owner of Sun Records, was looking for a white man who had the Negro sound and the Negro feel. This was not about theft, but about a genuine cultural fusion. It was about breaking down barriers. Elvis often invited black artists to his shows. He spoke of his respect for them. He never publicly disparaged black music or musicians. While the larger music industry had its racial problems, Elvis himself was a product of and a contributor to a complex cultural exchange. He helped popularize a sound that eventually led to a more integrated music scene, even if it wasn't perfect. But did Elvis do enough to actively support black artists financially or professionally beyond simple praise? How aware was he of the structural inequities faced by black musicians at the time? And could his impact have been even greater if he had used his immense platform more explicitly for civil rights causes? Number 16 was Elvis, a simple country boy, naive about business. The image of Elvis as a naive, trusting soul, easily manipulated by the shrewd Colonel Parker, is a persistent one. He was just a musician, he loved his family, he loved his cars, he left the money stuff to others. This paints him as innocent, perhaps even childlike in his financial dealings. It suggests he didn't understand the complexities of contracts or endorsements. However, this myth downplays Elvis's own intelligence and his understanding of his worth. Biographers like Elaine Dundee in Elvis and Gladys note that Elvis was observant and quick-witted from a young age. He grew up poor. He knew the value of a dollar. He understood how quickly fortunes could change. When he started out, he was very keen on his earnings. He was determined his family would never go back to poverty. He made sure his parents were comfortable. He bought them a home. He bought them cars. This wasn't the action of someone oblivious to money. Jerry Hopkins in Elvis: A Biography points out that Elvis understood the power of his image. He knew his appeal. He knew what he was worth to audiences. While he did delegate the heavy business lifting to Colonel Parker, this was often a conscious choice. He preferred to focus on performing and making music. He found the business side tedious. He trusted Parker to handle it. For a long time, Parker delivered. He got Elvis massive record deals. He got him movie contracts. He made Elvis incredibly rich. Elvis saw the results. It's true that Parker took an unusually high percentage of his earnings, 50%. And in hindsight, many argue Elvis was taken advantage of. But Elvis was not entirely ignorant. He signed those contracts. He often had legal counsel, even if they sometimes deferred to Parker's authority. He was aware of the money coming in. He spent lavishly. This suggests he understood the scale of his wealth. His naivete was perhaps more a product of his preference to avoid confrontation and his trust in the person he believed was looking out for him, rather than a lack of basic intelligence about finance. He was smart enough to recognize his talent was a valuable commodity. He simply chose to let someone else manage the complex machinery of exploiting that commodity. But did Elvis ever truly grasp the long-term impact of Parker's decision to forego international touring on his legacy and wealth? Was his naivete an excuse for not wanting to deal with the unpleasant aspects of his own business? And how much did his upbringing in poverty influence his decision to trust someone entirely with his vast wealth? Number 15, was Elvis a manufactured pop star? Some critics argue Elvis was not a genuine artistic force. They claim he was a product, a creation of clever marketing and media hype. He was a manufactured teen idol, designed to sell records. He lacked authenticity. This idea suggests his rise was inorganic. It says he was engineered by record labels and managers. He was just a pretty face and a unique sound packaged for mass consumption. But biographical studies, especially those focusing on his early career, strongly contradict this. Elvis's rise was incredibly organic and grassroots. Peter Guralnick's last train to Memphis meticulously tracks his early days. He wasn't discovered by a major label. He walked into Sun Records in Memphis. He paid for a demo record. He was an unknown. Sam Phillips, a small independent producer, took a chance on him. And Phillips wasn't part of a massive industry machine. He was experimenting. Elvis's early success was built on live performances. He toured relentlessly across the South. He played in small clubs. He played at high school dances. He played at local fairs. His audiences reacted instantly and viscerally. People weren't told to like him. They just did. His raw energy, his controversial hit movements, his unique blend of sounds. This resonated directly with teenagers. Word spread by word of mouth. His early recordings on Sun, like That's All Right and Mystery Train, became regional hits through sheer popular demand, not massive radio promotion. When RCA bought his contract from Sun for $35,000 in 1955, it was because he was already a phenomenon. He had a massive, passionate fan base. He had proven commercial appeal. RCA didn't create him. They acquired a ready-made star. They then amplified what was already there. They gave him national and international reach. But the foundation of his fame was built on genuine, electric performances and revolutionary recordings that connected directly with the public. He wasn't assembled in a boardroom. He emerged from the cultural crucible of the American South. He was an authentic force, not a manufactured product. But how much did early radio play, even if regional, still contribute to an artificial amplification of his appeal? Could Elvis have achieved the same level of global superstardom without a major label like RCA behind him? And if he wasn't manufactured, did the later stage of his career, with its formulas and predictable output, become a form of self-manufacturing? Number 14 was Elvis's later career a complete artistic decline. Well, many people see Elvis's later career, especially his time in Las Vegas, as a tragic artistic decline. They picture a bloated, sequined caricature, a man just going through the motions, singing old hits, lost in a haze of prescription drugs. The vibrant, rebellious energy of the 1950s was gone, replaced by a tired, commercialized version of himself. It's a sad narrative. It suggests his artistry withered away, but biographical studies and critical assessments of his live performances challenge this blanket dismissal. While it's true that his health issues and reliance on medication took a toll, and some of his movie soundtracks were artistically weak, his live performances, especially in Vegas and during his tours, often showed incredible vocal power and stage presence. Peter Guralnick's Careless Love details the electric atmosphere of his early Vegas shows in 1969. He returned to live performing after years in Hollywood. He was lean, he was hungry. He delivered incredible performances, critics raved, he reimagined his old songs. He tackled new material with passion, his voice matured, he gained a richer, deeper baritone range. Listen to recordings from his Aloha from Hawaii concert in 1973, or his Elvis as recorded live on stage in Memphis album from the same year. His vocal prowess is undeniable. He could still hit the high notes, he could still convey immense emotion. He was a master showman, he commanded the stage like few others. He wasn't just recycling his past. He was reinterpreting it, he was exploring new arrangements, he was pouring his soul into gospel numbers. His live bands were top-notch. They pushed him to be better. Yes, there were nights where he struggled. There were performances where he was clearly unwell. But to dismiss his entire later career as a decline misses the sheer power and artistry he often displayed. He wasn't the same rebellious youth, he was a mature artist. He was grappling with the weight of his own legend. His performances were often a testament to his enduring talent. They were a showcase of a truly remarkable voice. He might have been trapped in contracts and health struggles, but the fire still burned. He still delivered moments of pure, unadulterated brilliance. But what impact did his manager's decision to avoid international touring have on his artistic evolution in these later years? Did his set lists become too predictable, or was he catering to what fans demanded? And what might his later artistic output have looked like if his health had remained robust, free from the shadow of addiction? To number 13, was Elvis a drug addict from the start? The tragic image of Elvis's final years is often linked to drug addiction. Many assume he was a drug addict for most of his adult life, that he started early, that drugs were a central part of his life from the beginning of his fame. This myth simplifies his complex medical history. It reduces him to a stereotype. It overlooks the context of his prescription drug use. Biographical studies show a more complicated timeline. Elvis did not start his career as a drug addict. In the 1950s, his drug of choice was often simply energy and adrenaline. He was known for his incredible stamina. He performed night after night. He traveled constantly. He did take diet pills in the late 1950s, common among entertainers trying to manage weight and energy. His serious reliance on prescription medication, particularly opiates and sedatives, began to escalate significantly later. Alana Nash's The Colonel, and even earlier, works like Albert Goldman's controversial but well-researched Elvis detail the progression. His drug use intensified during his military service in Germany, 1958 to 1960. He was introduced to amphetamines. These were given to soldiers to stay awake during maneuvers. He began using them for energy. When he returned, the demands of Hollywood, the grueling film schedules, and the pressure of maintaining his image fueled this reliance. The constant need to be on led to using uppers during the day. This then led to using downers to sleep at night. It became a vicious cycle. His health problems also contributed. He suffered from chronic insomnia. He had a deteriorating colon condition, he had glaucoma, he had a weak heart. His doctor George C. Nicopolis prescribed a vast array of medications to treat these actual ailments. While Dr. Nick was later criticized for overprescribing, Elvis's pain and discomfort were real. Though he self-medicated, he used drugs to cope with physical and emotional pain. This was not a simple case of recreational drug abuse. It was a complex battle with chronic illness, intense professional demands, and a system that enabled his access to pharmaceuticals. His addiction was a tragic consequence of many factors, not an inherent trait from his youth. But how much did the societal norms of the time, where prescription drugs were less regulated, contribute to his problem? Did his personal entourage, the Memphis Mafia, enable his habit more than protect him? And could stronger intervention at an earlier stage, perhaps during his military service, have altered the course of his life dramatically? Number 12. Was Elvis a mama's boy, overly dependent on Gladys? The image of Elvis as a mama's boy is pervasive. It suggests an unhealthy, almost infantile dependence on his mother, Gladys. This idea implies he never truly grew up. He remained tied to her apron strings, that her death left him completely lost and unable to cope as an adult. It paints a picture of emotional fragility and a lack of self-sufficiency. However, biographical studies like Elaine Dundee's Elvis and Gladys paint a more complex and human picture of their relationship. Yes, Elvis and Gladys shared an extraordinarily deep bond. She doted on him, and he adored her. She was a central figure in his life. Growing up in poverty, their small family unit, Elvis, Gladys, and Vernon, was incredibly tight-knit. They relied on each other for survival and emotional support. This created an unbreakable attachment. But their relationship was not just one-sided dependence. Elvis also took on the role of protector for his mother and family. As soon as he found success, his primary goal was to provide for them. He bought them a house. He showered them with gifts. He wanted to ensure Gladys never worked another day in her life. This was an act of a responsible, loving son, not just a dependent child. He felt a profound sense of duty and love. When Gladys died in 1958, while Elvis was in the army, it was a devastating blow. It plunged him into deep grief. It profoundly affected him, but he didn't collapse into total helplessness. He continued his military service. He returned to a thriving career. He married. He had a child. He sought companionship and love in his life. While the loss left an unfillable void, it also forced him to confront his own mortality and the need to build a life without her constant physical presence. He carried her memory with him, but he continued to function and achieve immense success. Their bond was deep. It was powerful. It was a source of his emotional strength, not just a sign of weakness or immaturity. He honored her memory by living a life of generosity and ambition, even as he grieved. But did his profound bond with Gladys influence his later relationships, perhaps making it difficult for other women to live up to her idealized image? Did his public display of grief for her mask other, unaddressed emotional issues? And would his life have taken a dramatically different path if Gladys had lived longer, offering him different guidance or emotional support? Number 11. Was Elvis a womanizer, shallow with relationships? The image of Elvis as a playboy, a womanizer, is common. He was incredibly handsome. He was famous, he had access to countless women. This often leads to the conclusion that his relationships were shallow, that he was just interested in conquest, that he couldn't form deep, lasting bonds. This myth diminishes his capacity for love and commitment. It suggests a lack of emotional depth. However, biographies like Elvis and Me by Priscilla Presley and various accounts from his close friends and family show a different side. While Elvis certainly had many relationships and enjoyed the company of women, he also yearned for companionship and genuine connection. He was often lonely. He sought a stable family life. He proposed marriage to several women before Priscilla. His relationship with Priscilla was a serious, long-term commitment. It led to marriage and a child, Lisa Marie. He deeply loved both of them. His struggle in relationships often stemmed from the unique pressures of his fame. It was incredibly difficult for any woman to share his life. He was constantly surrounded by his Memphis Mafia. He was always working, he had little privacy, his lifestyle was unusual, many women found it hard to adapt. He also sought an idealized version of love, a love like he imagined from the movies. He struggled to reconcile this fantasy with the realities of married life and infidelity on both sides. His relationships, even those that didn't last, were often characterized by intense affection and generosity. He showered the women in his life with gifts. He tried to care for them. He longed for someone to understand him. someone to be a true partner. His infidelities, while damaging, were often driven by loneliness, the temptations of fame, and a search for unconditional affection. He was looking for that deep connection he had lost with his mother. He wasn't simply a shallow user of women. He was a man with a deep capacity for love, but also a complex individual who struggled to maintain conventional relationships under extraordinary circumstances. He sought out women who genuinely interested him, not just those who were easily available. But how much did his fame make it impossible for him to have a truly normal relationship? Did his own idealized view of women, shaped by his Southern upbringing, make real-world relationships inevitably disappointing? And did the constant presence of his male entourage hinder his ability to truly connect intimately with women? Number 10 was Elvis unpatriotic? Did he avoid real service in the army? A persistent myth suggests that Elvis's army service was a publicity stunt, that he got special treatment, that he avoided the dangers and hardships of real soldiering. Some believed he was unpatriotic, choosing service only because his career was slowing down or to clean up his image. This myth downplays his genuine commitment to his country. It implies he was pampered and not a real soldier. However, historical records and detailed biographies like Peter Guralnick's Careless Love unequivocally prove otherwise. Elvis insisted on serving as a regular GI. He could have easily joined special services. He could have entertained troops. He could have used his celebrity status to avoid the grind of basic training. Colonel Parker initially pushed for this, but Elvis refused. He wanted to be a regular soldier. He wanted to prove he was just like any other man. He was drafted into the U.S. Army on March 24, 1958, and served as Private E2 Presley. He went through basic training at Fort Hood, Texas. He served in Company A, 2D Medium Tank Battalion, 37th Armor, 3D Armored Division. He shipped out to Germany. He served in Friedberg, Germany from October 1958 to March 1960. He performed all his duties. He qualified as an expert marksman. His commanding officers spoke highly of his conduct. They noted his willingness to do his part. He cleaned latrines. He stood guard duty. He drove a Jeep. He earned 2 promotions during his service, rising to sergeant. His time in the Army was not without personal hardship. His mother, Gladys, died while he was in basic training. This was a devastating blow, yet he returned to duty. He completed his service honorably. He maintained a strong sense of pride in his military record throughout his life. His service was a genuine act of patriotism. It was a desire to fulfill his duty, and it showed his character. He faced the same challenges as his fellow soldiers, except for the added pressure of constant media attention. He used his service to show respect for his country and to prove his own integrity beyond the show business facade. But did his insistence on regular service stem from a deep personal conviction or a clever move to solidify his all-American image? Did his fellow soldiers ever resent his fame, even as he tried to be one of them? And how much did his time in the Army, particularly the death of his mother while he was away, truly shape his adult personality and future struggles? Number 9 was Elvis a racist? The accusation that Elvis was a racist has surfaced periodically. This myth usually stems from the idea that he stole black music, or from a single unverified quote attributed to him. The quote, often cited without a source, claims Elvis said, "The only thing Negroes can do for me is buy my records and shine my shoes." This quote is a powerful, damaging statement. If true, it would fundamentally change how we view him. However, extensive biographical research and countless interviews with people who knew him directly refute this claim. There is no credible evidence, no documented source, and no reliable witness who ever heard Elvis utter such a racist remark. The quote is widely considered apocryphal. It has been debunked by numerous biographers and historians. Peter Guralnick, in his comprehensive works, found no evidence of it. Jerry Hopkins also addressed this. Instead, the evidence points to a lifelong admiration and respect for black artists and black culture. Elvis grew up in a mixed-race neighborhood in Tupelo and later in Memphis. His musical tastes were profoundly shaped by black gospel, blues, and R&B. He frequented Beale Street. He spoke with reverence about artists like B.B. King, Jackie Wilson, and Sam Cooke. He brought his friends to see these artists perform. He learned from them. He jammed with them. Many black artists and figures have spoken out in his defense. B.B. King himself stated that Elvis was a man of the people. King said Elvis was not a racist. He credited Elvis with helping to break down racial barriers in music. Sam Phillips, his first producer, also confirmed Elvis's deep respect for black music. The Memphis Mafia members, who spend every day with him, also confirm his inclusive attitudes. He hired black musicians for his band. He had black security guards. His actions consistently showed an appreciation for all people, regardless of race, especially in a segregated South. While he wasn't a vocal civil rights activist, his music and his personal interactions demonstrated a clear rejection of racial prejudice. But where did this damaging unsourced quote originate, and why did it persist for so long? Did Elvis's manager, Colonel Parker, ever advise him to avoid being too outwardly friendly with black artists for fear of alienating some white audiences? And could his private admiration for black artists have translated into more active public support for the civil rights movement, given his immense platform? Number 8, Elvis never wrote his own songs. This is a common belief. Many think Elvis was just a singer, a phenomenal interpreter. But he never composed. He didn't write the lyrics, he didn't create the melodies. This idea limits his creative contribution. It suggests he was merely a vessel for others' material. It implies a lack of genuine songwriting talent or interest. It is true that Elvis Presley has very few official songwriting credits. Colonel Parker, his manager, had a strict policy. To get Elvis to record a song, the songwriter often had to give up a portion of the publishing rights to Elvis. This meant Elvis got a co-writing credit, even if he didn't write a single word or note. This was a standard, albeit ethically questionable, practice in the music industry at the time, especially for major stars. This is why you see Love Me Tender credited to Vera, Matson, and Elvis Presley, even though Matson Ken Darby wrote it. However, studies and accounts from those who worked with him reveal a more involved artistic process. While he may not have written songs from scratch, Elvis was deeply involved in the arrangement and interpretation of his music. He would spend hours in the studio. He would work with his musicians. He would change melodies. He would alter tempos. He would suggest chord progressions. He would rework lyrics to better suit his vocal style and emotional delivery. Scotty Moore, Bill Black, and later band members like James Burton often spoke of Elvis's intense involvement in shaping the final sound of a song. He had an incredible ear. He had a natural musical instinct. He knew how to make a song his. He didn't just sing what was put in front of him. He reimagined it. He infused it with his unique energy. Where he collaborated, his input was often significant enough to be considered a creative contribution. He wasn't a formal composer, but he was far more than just a vocalist. He was an arranger. He was a musical director in the studio. He was a key force in how his songs ultimately sounded and felt. His fingerprints were all over his recordings, even if his name wasn't on the songwriting credits for every track. But if he had such a strong creative input, why did he not push back more against the publishing deals that gave him unearned credit? How much original material did he work on privately that never saw the light of day? And if he had dedicated himself to formal songwriting, could he have become a respected composer in his own right? Number 7, Elvis hated the movies he made. The common narrative says Elvis hated his movies. He felt trapped. He wanted to make serious, dramatic films. Instead, Colonel Parker forced him into one lightweight musical comedy after another. This myth suggests a constant state of artistic frustration. It implies he was miserable during his entire Hollywood career. It paints him as a victim of his manager's commercial agenda, but the reality is more nuanced. While Elvis certainly grew disillusioned with the quality of his films, especially in the later 1960s, he didn't hate them from the start. In fact, he initially embraced Hollywood. He saw it as a legitimate career path. He wanted to be a serious actor. His early films like Jailhouse Rock, 1957, and King Creole, 1958, were critically praised. They showed his potential as a dramatic actor. Biographers like Peter Guralnick mention his enthusiasm for acting. He took acting lessons. He worked hard at his craft. His frustration grew when the scripts became formulaic. Colonel Parker's strategy was simple: churn out 3 movies a year. They all had to feature Elvis singing a few songs. They had to be clean. They had to be low budget. The plots were often flimsy. Elvis desperately wanted better roles. He tried to get parts in films like West Side Story and Midnight Cowboy. But Parker always refused. Parker believed his formula was foolproof, and financially it was. Films like Blue Hawaii, 1961 were massive box office hits. So Elvis became professional about it. He showed up. He did his work. He delivered his lines. He sang his songs, he made friends on set, he was well liked by crews and co-stars. He knew these films paid the bills for him and his entire entourage. He was trapped by contracts, but his attitude wasn't one of constant misery. It was more one of resignation and professionalism. He stopped caring about the artistic quality, but he didn't hate the act of filmmaking entirely until the very end, when the quality became truly unbearable. His goal was always to provide for his family, and these films, whatever their artistic merit, did exactly that for over a decade. But how much did his genuine initial enthusiasm for acting affect his disappointment later on? If Parker had allowed him to take just one serious dramatic role, how might that have changed the trajectory of his film career? And did Elvis ever truly forgive Parker for limiting his artistic aspirations in Hollywood? Number 6, was Elvis a recluse in his later years? The image of Elvis in his later years often shows him as a recluse, hidden away in Graceland, isolated from the world, surrounded only by his Memphis Mafia. This myth portrays a man cut off from reality, afraid to face the public, someone who couldn't handle the pressures of fame anymore. It conjures a picture of loneliness and detachment. While it's true that Elvis spent a lot of time at Graceland and had a close, insular circle of friends, calling him a recluse is an oversimplification. He maintained a busy touring schedule for much of the 1970s. He performed hundreds of concerts. He was constantly traveling to different cities. He faced thousands of fans every night. This is not the life of a recluse. Biographical accounts from people like Joe Esposito and Jerry Schilling, members of his inner circle, whose memoirs offer insights, show that Elvis valued his privacy at Graceland. It was his sanctuary. It was where he could relax. It was where he could be himself, away from the public eye. But he wasn't entirely cut off. He enjoyed going to the movies in Memphis. He would rent out entire theaters for private screenings with his friends. He would sometimes visit amusement parks after hours. He drove around in his cars. He met with fans at the gates of Graceland, though less frequently in his final years. He did struggle with public life. The constant demands of fame were immense. The media scrutiny was relentless. He found solace in his home and with his trusted friends. But he was also a generous host. He regularly had friends and family stay at Graceland. He engaged in conversation. He read extensively. He watched films. He even had a strong interest in spiritual and philosophical texts. His later isolation was more about carefully curating his personal space and managing his public persona, rather than a complete withdrawal from the world. He sought peace, not total seclusion. He also simply loved being home, but did his carefully managed public appearances contribute to the perception of him being more isolated than he truly was? How much did his reliance on his inner circle shield him from necessary outside perspectives or interventions regarding his health? And what social interactions did he miss out on because of the unique prison of his fame? Number 5, was Elvis a victim of his own fame, unable to cope? This myth paints Elvis as a tragic figure, a man overwhelmed by his own celebrity. He couldn't handle the pressure. He was destroyed by fame. It suggests he was fundamentally weak, that his life was inevitably headed for a sad end because of the sheer weight of his iconic status. This view removes his agency. It reduces his complex life to a simple narrative of victimhood. While fame certainly played a massive role in Elvis's life, and it brought immense pressures, it wasn't the sole cause of his struggles. Biographies by Guralnick and others show a more intricate picture. Elvis was a complex individual. He had deep insecurities. He had a profound desire for love and acceptance. He also had a tendency towards self-destructive behavior. These traits existed independently of his fame, though fame certainly amplified them. His health issues, his chronic pain, his dependency on prescription drugs, and his troubled relationships all contributed to his decline. These were personal struggles. They were compounded by fame, but not solely caused by it. Many celebrities cope with fame and thrive. Others struggle. Elvis was an individual with his own unique set of psychological vulnerabilities and coping mechanisms. He wasn't just a passive victim. He made choices. He chose to trust Colonel Parker implicitly for decades. He chose to indulge in certain behaviors. He chose to prioritize comfort and instant gratification over long-term health in many instances. He was often surrounded by enablers, but he was also an adult with agency. He sought spiritual guidance. He read extensively. He tried to understand himself and the world around him. He showed immense resilience throughout his career, returning to the stage repeatedly despite his difficulties. His story is tragic, yes, but it's not simply a story of a helpless victim. It's the story of a powerful artist and a complicated man battling internal and external demons, some of which were exacerbated by, but not solely created by, his extraordinary fame. But did the constant adulation from millions of fans blind him to his own personal shortcomings, or the need for professional help? Could a less isolated life outside the Graceland bubble have given him different tools to cope with his immense fame? And how much did his own internal struggles with identity and purpose contribute to his tragic end, regardless of his celebrity? Number 4, Elvis only cared about money. Some people might think Elvis was primarily driven by money, that his decisions, especially in his later career, were all about maximizing profit. The endless movies, the repetitive Vegas shows. This myth suggests a greedy, materialistic man, someone who put financial gain above artistic integrity. It reduces his generosity and his genuine desires to just a pursuit of wealth. But biographical studies reveal a man who was generous to a fault, someone who genuinely cared for his family and friends. While he loved nice things, cars, planes, jewelry, his desire for money was often rooted in his childhood poverty. He wanted to ensure his family never experienced that hardship again. He wanted to provide a life of comfort for them. This was a deep-seated motivation. His generosity was legendary. He bought countless cars for strangers. He paid off mortgages for friends. He funded medical treatments for people he barely knew. He gave away expensive rings and watches on a whim. His friends and family were constantly supported by him. He built Graceland as a home for his entire extended family, not just for himself. He shared his wealth. He didn't hoard it. He often carried large sums of cash just so he could spontaneously help people he encountered. Colonel Parker, his manager, was definitely driven by money, but Elvis's motivation was different. He made the movies and did the Vegas shows because it was his job. It was how he supported his tribe. He also genuinely loved performing. While the money was a clear benefit, it wasn't his sole driving force. He was always looking for new ways to express himself musically. He pushed for the '68 comeback special, not for financial gain, but for artistic relevance. He wasn't a ruthless businessman. He was a performer. He was a provider. His generosity far outweighed any perceived greed. His desire for wealth was often tied to his desire to share it with those he loved. But did his extreme generosity enable a dependency culture among his entourage, leading to less critical feedback on his declining health? Did his constant need to provide for others inadvertently pressure him into taking on projects he disliked? And was his love for flashy material possessions a genuine enjoyment or a way to fill an emotional void? Number 3, Elvis was a cultural anomaly, a one-off phenomenon. Many consider Elvis a singular, unexplainable event, a meteor that crashed into culture. He was unique. He had no real predecessors. He just appeared out of nowhere. This myth suggests he was an isolated genius. It implies he had no roots in existing musical traditions, that his appeal was a magical, unrepeatable occurrence. However, cultural historians and musicologists have meticulously shown that Elvis was a brilliant synthesizer of existing cultural currents. He wasn't an anomaly, he was the perfect storm. He emerged from a specific historical and cultural moment. He drew heavily from diverse traditions. Peter Guralnick's work emphasizes this. Elvis absorbed gospel music from the church. He listened to rhythm and blues on Beale Street. He grew up with country music on the radio. He blended these sounds. He put them through his own unique filter. He was also a product of the post-WE American youth culture. Teenagers had disposable income. They were looking for their own identity. They were rebelling against their parents' generation. Elvis gave them a voice. He gave them a style. He gave them music that spoke directly to their desires for excitement and freedom. He tapped into the anxieties and aspirations of an entire generation. He was also a visual phenomenon. His looks, his clothes, his famous hip movements, these weren't invented in a vacuum. They drew on existing black performance styles. They drew on movie stars. They drew on subcultures. But Elvis put them all together in a package that was electrifying and undeniably his own. He was the bridge. He connected black and white music. He connected country and pop. He connected youth rebellion with mainstream acceptance. He wasn't a one-off. He was the culmination of powerful social, economic, and musical forces. His Genius was in his ability to perfectly embody and articulate these forces at the precise moment they were ready to explode onto the global stage. But how much of his immediate impact was simply due to his racial identity, making black music palatable to wider white audiences? Could any other artist have achieved the same level of cultural synthesis without his unique charisma and vocal talent? And if he wasn't an anomaly, what specific cultural trends or musical fusions are we still overlooking that contributed to his rise? Number 2, Elvis's death was purely drug-related. The official cause of Elvis Presley's death on August 16, 1977 was cardiac arrest. But the popular perception is that he died from a massive drug overdose. This myth simplifies a very complex medical reality. It reduces his death to a single, tragic cause. It implies a sudden, self-inflicted end due to recreational drug abuse. However, forensic pathology and detailed medical biographies offer a much more nuanced explanation. While Elvis certainly had a severe problem with prescription drug abuse, and these drugs undoubtedly weakened his body, they were not the sole cause of his death. His autopsy and later medical analyses revealed he suffered from several significant chronic health issues. He had an enlarged heart. This was a congenital condition. He had severe bowel problems, megacolon. He also likely suffered from alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, a genetic disorder affecting the lungs and liver. He had chronic issues with glaucoma. He had high blood pressure. These conditions placed immense strain on his body. The drugs he took, often prescribed by his doctor for these very ailments, compounded these problems. The combination of his underlying genetic health issues, his poor diet, his sedentary lifestyle outside of performing, and the vast array of prescription medications created a perfect storm for his system to fail. Dr. George Nikopoulos, his physician, later stated that Elvis's liver and heart were severely damaged from long-term stress and medication, but also from genetic predispositions. The drugs were a major factor. They were a significant contributor. They certainly didn't help. But to say he died purely from an overdose ignores the profound organic health problems that were ravaging his body for years. His death was a tragic culmination of genetic vulnerabilities, chronic disease, and the enabling environment of prescription drug abuse. It was not simply a recreational drug overdose. It was a breakdown of a system already on the brink. But how much did the fear of public scandal or legal repercussions influence the official pronouncements around his death? Could an earlier aggressive intervention for his physical ailments, separate from his drug use, have significantly extended his life? And if his underlying genetic health issues were so severe, how much responsibility should truly be placed on his personal choices versus his biological fate? Number 1, Elvis never cared about social issues or politics. Many people believe Elvis was apolitical. He rarely spoke about social issues. He never marched in protests. He didn't endorse political candidates publicly. This myth portrays him as indifferent, someone who only cared about his music and his personal life. It suggests a lack of social conscience, especially during the tumultuous years of the Civil Rights Movement and the Vietnam War. However, biographical accounts and analyses of his personal convictions reveal a different story. While Elvis was not a public activist, he held strong personal beliefs. He was a product of the South. He was deeply religious. He believed in American values. He expressed patriotism openly. His famous meeting with President Richard Nixon at the White House in December 1970 is often cited as an example of his political engagement. He asked Nixon to make him a federal agent at large in the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs. This was a serious, if somewhat eccentric, request. It showed his concern about drug abuse in America. It wasn't just a photo opportunity he wanted to help. He also showed a personal disdain for racism, as discussed earlier. He grew up in a segregated South, but embraced black culture and music without prejudice. While he didn't join civil rights marches, his very existence, his music, and his cross-racial appeal were, in a way, a powerful social statement. He broke down barriers simply by being Elvis. He hired black musicians in his band, like James Burton, who famously played guitar for him for years. In private, he discussed current events with his friends. He read books on philosophy and religion. He searched for meaning. He cared about the state of the world, even if he didn't publicly campaign. His way of contributing was often through his music, which brought joy and connection to millions, and through his personal interactions. He was a man of his time and place, navigating the complexities of fame and personal belief in a way that was true to himself, even if it didn't fit the mold of a traditional political activist. His engagement was personal and subtle, rather than public and outspoken. But did his massive fame prevent him from taking a more vocal stance on issues like civil rights, fearing backlash or alienating segments of his audience? How much did Colonel Parker's strict avoidance of political statements influence Elvis's public silence on controversial topics? And what might his legacy be today if he had chosen to use his unparalleled platform to champion specific social causes more directly?